Oh my
nice.
God. Absolutely.
Nice.
Wait, where's the other one?
Ladies and gentlemen, we're here for the movie event of the year.
Barbenheimer.
Let's go.
Will it look okay?
Yeah, we did it, boys. We made it
I want
to.
to see.
This event has been
Looks
hyped
lovely,
up
Les.
for many movie eons, and we have finally made it here. We are sitting here morning after. Some of us watched both yesterday. Laz, I think you watched Barbie the day before.
I watched Barbie a few days ago. I couldn't watch them on the same day, sadly.
Why not?
Just really busy.
Just schedule-wise. Yeah.
I got a show tomorrow.
He just couldn't
This will come
endure
out definitely
both.
after the show, so never mind.
No, he just couldn't experience both of those things in the same 24-hour window. It would be too emotionally.
That would be a little
Straught.
too draining, yeah. Jake,
do you
what was
think-
your watch order? What did you do?
I did Barbie first. And
Same
then-
day?
Same day.
We did it together.
Oh, you guys
We
both
did them
did
together. Yeah.
Oh, you did Barbie 2 yesterday.
Yeah, I did Barbie 2
see.
yesterday.
Okay.
So, yeah, I've seen them both. Do
Wow.
you think that the industry is going to try to do this again? I feel like both movies got a boost by being
This
released
was an
on the same
insane
day.
success. I heard on a podcast yesterday that 200,000 people booked both the same day.
So this is the question. We were talking about this with Dylan yesterday. Is there a move where you can engine? Because presumably this was accidental. I think it's unlikely they actually deliberately did it, although maybe it's a
It
masterstroke
did
of
seem
genius.
like a pretty natural curve towards.
Yeah, my suspicion is also it helped Oppenheimer much more than Barbie. Like it was a huge hit for Oppenheimer. But if you were going to try to construct this, are there two films you can think of like
Films
genres
that have already existed.
or
That would be
even-
fun.
Yeah,
Let's
that would
start
be
with
fun. Ooh, yeah.
What would be a double feature of two pretty thematically opposed films? Although I don't know if they're thematically opposed.
Mamma
but-
Mia 2 and Avengers Endgame.
Well, no, Mamma Mia and The Dark Knight released on the same
Really?
weekend. Yeah, so
Maybe
Christopher
they
Nolan
invented
ran
it.
into this before.
Wow.
Really?
Yeah, The Dark Knight and Mamma Mia came out on the same day.
Yeah, I saw Mamma Mia, and it was not.
I haven't seen it.
It's not good.
So are we thinking any two movies? Create a double bill of any two movies that are
Star
wildly
Wars and
different.
Annie Hall kind of happened
That's
the same
pretty
year.
good. It's pretty good. Star Wars and Annie Hall.
I mean, these two
that-
movies are very similar, but There Will Be Blood and No Country for Old Men, filmed in the same place at the same time.
Wow.
And
They're pretty similar, yeah.
yeah, they're very similar movies.
I would venture to guess that for a lot of people, those movies are like the same movie.
yeah,
Some people probably think they are the same movie.
but they're inextricably linked forever because they both came out in 2007. 1994 was a great year for movies. Shawshank Redemption, Pulp Fiction, and Forrest Gump.
I don't think Jake understands.
I don't think I understand.
Yeah,
the
no,
credits.
we're not talking. We're talking about think of two movies that are very different to release on the same day.
Okay.
Barbie and Oppenheimer.
Barbie and Oppenheimer.
There's a template for you.
Like Barbenheimer.
Right.
What's the next Barbenheimer?
Jake's like Kramer versus Kramer, and Mr. and Mrs. Smith. All right, let's get on with it.
There isn't another one. This has only ever happened one time.
Beautiful, Mark.
Even though it's also happened before with the Dark
But
Knight.
I bet you that they're going to try to do this again. It was good for the whole movie
I think it's
industry.
hard to execute again, though. It's like it had to be. It sort of had to be so extreme. It also kind of organically emerged as a thing on the internet.
That's why I'm
when
saying I don't
people
think
realized-
it was engineered. I think
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
it started off like a year or two ago. People were like, "Oh my god, they're releasing the same day,"
And it became a
Haha.
meme.
Became a meme, and then it was like Barbenheimer, and then it started becoming. People were making pictures of it, graphics, and making
Yeah.
jokes, memes. So many memes about it. Great
So
memes
many
about
memes.
it.
Lots, a really generous time on the internet for memes for all of us. It was great.
Yeah.
Should we get
Let's
into?
figure out first how we're going to do this.
Okay.
We're going to talk about one movie and then the other. Are we going to talk about Barbenheimer as a whole first?
I think we
Let's
should definitely talk about one
cinema.
then the other.
Okay.
Well, let's start by saying which one did you guys like more?
Ooh.
I think we should say that
We
after.
should end with that.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
Let's end with that. So I think for the sake of setting the stage to talk about both, maybe we should talk about them together first and then separately. Together being this whole Barbenheimer thing, right? Not joking about it, but this is actually crazy. Two movies, movies are back.
It did feel
Being
that
in
way.
a
Watch
movie
Mission
theater
Impossible?
yesterday. Mission Impossible, yeah, it's just a great summer for movies. Being in a movie theater that was crowded, where people are trying to get tickets and they can't get tickets, it's the first time since Avengers Endgame.
Are movies
Being in a
back,
crowded
or
theater.
is this almost like our
anomaly?
dying bang?
It's the swan song for movies.
This is Babylon.
This is not what Babylon was. But I think we had this moment last summer with Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise continues to do it, where it was sort of like movies are back with this, but it was one movie. And it was this kind of like, and granted, you finished off the year with Avatar, but I think this feels like, okay, 3 all at the same time, a bunch of really good reviews. But I can't help but wonder, like, why, when and how is this going to The other thing was kind of unique, obviously kind of silly to say this about Barbie, but it was two net new IP to the movies, at least, which just hasn't happened in a long time. Again, like, ridiculous to say about Barbie.
But it's also kind of interesting that both are adaptations. One's an adaptation of a book, one is an adaptation of a product. Like, it's weird that they're original IP in the sense that they're original movies, but they're not. Neither of them are original IP.
I mean, there are no movies that are original IP that make money. As we talked about in the...
Which is an interesting point.
That's a good point,
right?
I think almost it's interesting that we are in the year of brands is sort of the dominant movie thing this year, between like the Hot Cheeto thing and the Nike thing and Blackberry and Barbie.
Wait, there's a Blackberry movie?
Yeah, apparently it was really good. I didn't see it.
I saw
And
it.
a Hot Cheeto movie?
Yeah.
Yeah. Which apparently was a made up story. Like, they made up a story about how like the Hispanic janitor came up with Hot Cheeto. Don't hold me to that, but I think that's true.
It's wow.
Like, it was a myth that they used to sell Hot Cheetos.
Interesting.
Love brands. I think it was just cool. It was very fun because it felt like, as you said, like somebody came up with this a couple years ago, and then for the last like 3 or 4 months, it's been, for anyone who cares at all about movies and probably the whole internet, it's just been this fun like lead up. And
what's a brand that should have a movie?
Ooh, that's a good question.
I'm sure they'll make a biopic about Bernard Arnault and LVMH. Not the most
LVMH?
exciting answer, but
Interesting.
he's the richest man in the world. Like
That that'll be a TV series.
oh yeah,
Definitely.
Yeah.
That's a miniseries. That's like a
Yeah,
6
yeah.
episode miniseries.
I think to stick with Mattel, I think that He-Man would be a good movie.
They're making Hot Wheels. I believe.
They're making G.I. Joe.
Making G.I. Joe. Okay.
Yeah.
Same
Not
difference.
G.I. Joe
Spoiled.
isn't Mattel, is it?
No, it's Hasbro.
I think they're
But at
making.
the end of the new Transformers movie, they tease G.I. Joe.
I think they're making Hot Wheels next. And there was some article about how there's going to be a Mattel CU.
Is Hot Wheels going to be like Fast and Furious? I
Your
hope
guess
so.
is as good as mine.
That's interesting.
I'm not sure I need more brand movies, but again, it's like
Yeah,
your
me neither.
choices are like Marvel, brands, or more Tom Cruise.
We also had Mario this year.
Yeah.
We forgot about that.
Yeah. Okay, so we have
Weird
4 future franchises. Nintendo, Disney, Toys, and Tom Cruise.
When's the last time a movie?
That was good.
When's the last
that
time-
was really good. That was a great point.
Thank you.
That was a good little clippable moment right there.
When's the last time like a totally brand new IP came out that made a lot of money and that was successful and a good movie?
Babylon wasn't successful.
Arguably, we thought it was a good movie.
I was gonna say Everything Everywhere All at Once, but that's like no. They reference everything in that.
It's also not I mean, it's new, but it's not a franchise.
Not a franchise. Is there anything that's a franchise
Harry Potter, not that old.
But that's based on books.
based on books? Fast and
Oh.
Furious.
There we
Fast
go.
and Furious, yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty rare that
That's an
movies
original
actually
franchise. It's
generate
just been
new
going
IP.
forever.
Like Star Wars did it, Fast and the Furious did it, Jurassic Park. But like most things are adapted. And by the way, I think it makes sense. I think movies in many ways are a form factor that benefits from adaptation.
Yeah, of course, because the hardest part of it's already done.
Yes,
Right.
and it's movies in many
going
ways are
from
about
0 to 1 is
compacting.
done.
And you want to compact something larger into sort of like this stage that can put it there for 2 hours, 3 hours. Like I think the form factor actually makes sense that it comes from, and it's not a coincidence that like Star Wars original IP in movies, it was inherently almost built to be a trilogy, I think.
Yeah.
So we should probably talk about the movies at hand.
Okay, let's talk about the movies.
We go in Barb or Op first.
Let's vote. Who votes Op first? Oppenheimer first. Wait, we should do it the order that we watched it.
Yeah. I agree.
Barbie first, then Oppenheimer. Because even though I did it in separate days, but I also did the same order.
What do we
You
think
guys
the
did.
viewers are
Barbie,
more
then
interested in?
Oppenheimer. Probably Oppenheimer, but
Maybe we should lead with Oppenheimer.
Maybe
No,
we
we
should
should
finish
save
with
it.
Oppenheimer
Yeah.
because that's what they're more interested in.
exactly.
Okay, well, you guys have a
Seeing
lot
how
of
the
trust. They're
sausage
not going to
gets
churn.
made, folks.
You guys, I don't have trust in them not to churn, but we could have already burned them all by the first 20 minutes of talking about nothing. So let's talk about
I think
Barbie.
if they care even a little bit about us like talking about movies and being film bros, then they'll wait through Barbie to.
I don't
get to
trust them to
Oppenheimer.
care.
Or they are people of taste and they also enjoyed Barbie. So
It's
let's talk about
crazy
Barbie.
that a bunch of people saw Barbie after Oppenheimer. It blows my mind.
Yeah, that
yeah,
would
that
be
definitely no. Yeah, that wouldn't.
but it's
work.
like the main. It seems like that's the main take. Like that's.
I think that would take away from like Oppenheimer was the kind of movie that I needed to just like go home after and go to sleep.
stare into the void.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Seeing Barbie after would diminish your experience of Oppenheimer, I would think.
I would agree.
So
We had a
let's
dinner
talk
in
about
between.
Barbie.
it's like a nice little dessert after your dinner. Oppenheimer's your dinner, Barbie's
I
your
get
dessert.
that.
Weirdly,
I get
they
that,
both-
dinner than dessert, but
No spoilers, but both films are kind of about like dealing with the existential nature of death.
true. So speaking of spoilers, spoiler territory starts now.
Yeah, we're just gonna talk about the movies.
Barbie.
Greta Gerwig shows up, makes her first like real blockbuster. She kind of made like A24 movies thus far.
Yeah, true.
She only
That's
made
true.
it. I'm kind of contemplating.
I don't know how
she
Little
wrote it.
Women did in theaters,
I think it's not a huge movie.
but it's an adaptation that has been done like 4 other times, so it's not like it was a nothing movie that came out.
true.
I'm sure it was like known about. Lady Bird, I think, was kind of like a cult classic. Like
Lady
if
Bird
you
not a
did
big
pretty
know,
well, I think. I remember Lady Bird getting like 100% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Sure, but it's not. Nobody's heard
it
of
was
it.
A24. It was pre Everything Everywhere All at Once. A24 levels of success.
Right.
Right. So it wasn't like Oppenheimer. It wasn't Barbie. You know.
Barbie is going to be
Huge.
Barbie might be the biggest box office release by a female director ever.
Yeah.
I think it probably will be, like almost undoubtedly.
Yeah.
So it's and alone, it's I don't know how much it's going to make this. It'll be one of the 3 biggest movies of the year. I think it can be truly large.
Maybe
so
the biggest. Yeah.
And it's interesting. I also thought it was interesting that Noah Baumbach and her co-wrote it, which is just such a hilarious combination.
Which is good because that's redemption for White Noise, which was terrible.
Oof.
But
I think
this is
you have
not
to
a
read the
White
book.
Noise.
But yeah, what do you guys think?
Greta Gerwig. Can we talk about Greta Gerwig for a second? I fucking love Greta Gerwig.
Yeah, she's a genius.
She's, I think, one of my favorite directors.
The weird
Probably
thing
like
is
a
she's
top
only
3 or
made.
4.
There's one that came before that I don't know how. Like I don't know if anyone saw, but she's real. This is only really her third movie.
film. Yeah, and her
I
first
count-
2 are perfect 5 out of 5s for me.
I kind of count Frances Ha because she wrote it,
Yeah.
and she's the star.
She's the star.
But I didn't love Little Women as much as you, but I think Lady Bird is just stellar. I'll be honest. I thought Barbie was good. I didn't have that high of expectations, knowing I'm probably not the core demographic, but it's definitely probably my third favorite of her movies.
I think the question that you have to ask is, why do you hate women?
That's probably that was the main thing running through my head. I think so. Let's get into it.
Yeah.
First off, they made a movie about the most famous toy in American history, probably. I would assume.
Yeah, I would assume so.
One of the most famous IPs. They've never made a movie. I think they've talked about doing it in the past, and they got Margot Robbie to sign on to make Barbie.
Wild, who's perfect.
She's
Yeah.
perfect.
Isn't it crazy? We'll talk about Margot later. Keep
And she says, I want Greta Gerwig to make it, which is kind of a bold take. Obviously, Greta is probably one of the most exciting young directors in Hollywood, and certainly, probably, at least in my opinion, the most exciting woman director in Hollywood. She is unbelievably, like, not what you would expect for like the generic toy movie in any way.
Yeah.
So I think there was inherent subversion there. And then if you go see the movie, obviously it takes subversion and like post like modern meta ironic, like Mattel's in the movie. It is a really fascinating take on something like this that, I mean, maybe the Lego movie has come close to doing, but not even at this level. It's rare for a movie that is clearly backed by the like big corporate brand behind it to sort of lean all the way in. And I think for that alone, like I really applaud what they tried to do. And I think in many ways they got a lot of it right. I can get into my criticisms, but like all in all, I think it's pretty amazing they made a movie like this. And then obviously
We'll
Margot
save
Robbie.
criticisms for later. That was a really good and concise summary, I think. What you said about it being so weird that like the brand behind it was so on board. Yeah, with one of the moments that I think epitomizes that is the moment where Issa Rae drops an F-bomb and it's censored by the Mattel logo. It was like, holy
was
shit.
fully
this
aware.
Is so self-aware. Probably the height of self-awareness in movies.
That's what I said in my Letterboxd review. To me, that almost it got a little too much. I was just like everything. Like there is one of the more interesting criticisms I've seen coming into the movie is just like it is interesting that like we can basically now decide we're all going to be totally fine with a movie backed by the company who made it that spent hundreds of millions on marketing it to be this like giant corporate machine. But as long as they're like in on the joke, we're all like going to celebrate it and be fine with it, which is extremely cynical. And I don't think that's a totally fair view of it. But it's interesting. Like I almost wonder if we're going to see more like corporate meta irony because it clearly worked here.
Oh, we're gonna see them try.
Yes.
We're not gonna see them succeed.
It's going to be tough.
It's gonna be
like
really
an Amazon
ugly.
movie where Jeff
Oh my
Bezos
God.
is like,
yeah.
Jeff Bezos is the butt of the joke.
yeah,
I can
a
see it.
Facebook
This
movie
summer,
where Mark
we
Zuckerberg.
deliver.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Could you imagine if that's what movies become? Just long
Brands.
advertisements.
That's what we had
what
this
they
year.
are.
We literally had
Yeah.
Air was literally like, hey, Nike saved Michael Jordan. Like,
Yeah, we had Air, BlackBerry. Everything we
Cheetos.
said. Hot Cheetos, like it's all brands. Mario was a huge brand movie.
Well,
It was
Mario's a
fun.
little different.
It was
Mario's
fun.
not a
I mean,
brand.
every Mario game was in that movie.
Sure, but Mario is IP.
Yeah.
In a way that like
Barbie's IP.
you'd say Barbie is too. Yeah.
But
definitely IP.
Hot Cheetos is definitely not IP.
Yeah.
There was a Transformers movie this year.
Yeah.
Like, there's
Yeah.
all
Okay.
kinds of IP stuff.
Yeah, Transformers is actually kind of the closest precursor to Barbie.
Yes. Transformers, I don't think we give Transformers enough credit for breaking a mold. The first Transformers. The
Yeah.
first we need to do an episode about the first Transformers. I've been saying it for
Incredible
a long time.
outro music.
It was kind of I'm the most iconic outro music of all time, other than Breakfast Club. It's like the Breakfast Club, number one, Transformers, number two. 100%. That's actually accurate. Think of another one.
I don't. It probably is, but okay. Let's talk about Margot Robbie.
Margot Robbie.
Yes.
It is probably, we'll see with like Robert Downey Jr. Margot Robbie might be the most consistently perfectly cast actor of all time. Consistently perfectly cast. Margot Robbie was born to play Barbie, was born to play Harley Quinn, was born to play everything she's ever done. Like she is.
Do you think because of that she's a little bit typecast?
I don't think it's typecast.
I think it's almost implied.
How wildly different.
Yeah, Barbie and Harley Quinn are two wildly different people.
Yeah.
That's true.
Wildly different characters.
That's true.
They are
Wildly different
polar
IP.
opposites.
I'm trying to think
actually.
of other movies that obviously she's in Babylon, which she was so exceptional.
Wolf of
She was
Wall
in-
Street.
Wolf of,
That was what made her famous.
That was what made her famous. And Wolf of Wall Street, apparently the script called for the hottest blonde in the world. That was what the script said.
that's what I meant when I said typecast. By the way, is like it would be. Then again, she played Tanya Harding, and like
yeah, she's like also perfect as Tanya
amazing,
Harding.
amazing underrated role in About Time before Wolf of Wall
Yes.
Street.
Yeah.
Plays like
What
the
is
girl
she,
next door.
The sister's friend.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't even remember
Yeah.
that.
Oh
Yeah, yeah.
my-
She's the one where
so
basically
good.
he falls in love. Spoiler, but she falls in love with him over the course of the summer. End of the summer, he asks her out. And she's like, "Oh, what if you went back and asked me? Like, if only you had asked me at the beginning of the summer." And then he goes back and she's like, "Ask me again at the end of the summer." He's like, "It was never gonna. No amount of time travel was gonna get me Margot Robbie."
Yeah.
She. So I think she'll get nominated for Best Actor here.
For Barbie?
Yeah. I think it
Really?
was.
I
yes.
agree.
How
The moments of like depth and weight were perfect. Were the
was-
best parts of the film.
it was such a hard role to play in an underrated. I'm going to say this about the next movie too, but I genuinely think about what she had to do there, which was like on one hand be like perfect Barbie, like ridiculous sort of stereotype, whatever. She had to play like this existential like kind of fear thing. She had to like carry the second half of the movie where she's sort of like this vehicle for the mom and the daughter and like connecting and like obviously all of the message that comes into I thought she was really, really great.
One thing about Margot Robbie is that she commits. Like she is one of the most committed actors. I think that's
Never going to talk about.
This might be like I think I know what you know I'm going to talk about. But she is it's kind of a chicken and egg thing of whether she is so perfectly cast or she just commits to her roles perfectly.
Right.
It's probably both. And you probably can't cast someone in these types of roles without it being someone who commits as hard as she does. But were you going to say the thing of what like her favorite Christmas movie?
No, I thought you were going to talk
So-
about apparently the practical effects of the.
Oh, I'll talk about that. But apparently her favorite Christmas movie is Elf. She said that on a podcast. And she said because Will Ferrell, like when you make a movie, you don't know it's going to be good because editing, marketing, everything.
Yeah.
And Will Ferrell just committed to being an elf and running around New York City in that crazy outfit and like truly committing
yeah,
to being
she's
elf.
sense. Think about Babylon.
Yeah, Babylon. She is a committed
You know who
actor.
she reminds me of a little bit? I think there's an element of Brad Pitt there.
Yes.
Obviously, You can
They're
start with
perfect
they're both,
together and-
they're both
yeah.
beautiful, whatever, and they're both in Babylon. But Brad Pitt, somebody said a long time ago, like Brad Pitt is a character actor stuck in a leading man's body.
Yeah, he is.
And I think there's a similar amount of like, think about the stuff he's done, by the way, like Benjamin Button, all those.
He's
And
amazing.
he kind of full sends too, in a way that I think you could, maybe it's, I even made the mistake by saying she was typecast. You could say like, oh, Margot is just cast because she's the perfect, beautiful, blonde American woman. Not even American.
Which is so funny.
And you could kind of hold it at that and say that's why she works in all these roles. But to your point, I don't think that's what it is at all. I think she's actually a brilliant actor who really does send. Like,
I think it's the ultimate compliment to give an actor to say that they're perfectly cast and everything, because that means that they became the role that they were.
Yeah.
Especially because she's perfectly cast in these roles that are wildly different from each other.
I think what we're maybe getting at, or at least something we're getting at, is that she is perfectly cast on a superficial level. Like everything we've said so far. She, like, you just look at her, that's Barbie. You look, that's Harley Quinn.
Yeah.
But what elevates it is her level of commitment and is her talent as an actor. So it's like she's perfectly cast superficially, and then she delivers. And that's when someone's perfectly cast. Like if they just look the part, but they don't deliver, then it falls flat.
Yep.
Is this going to be her biggest movie ever?
Yeah. By
No
far,
question.
probably
And
already
I think
is.
it's important because she had a pretty tough year last year between the movie I Didn't See Amsterdam, I think it's called.
Amsterdam, yeah. That,
And
that's a
then
terrible movie.
and then obviously we love Babylon, but was a total dud. And man, it will be really fun to see. I think she's probably like early 30s, 32, 33.
Mid-30s. Right?
Is she?
I don't know if she's even mid 30s. I think she's
30s.
fairly young.
She's in her 30s.
It will be really cool to watch what she does over the next 30 years. Like, just an awesome actor. Obviously, she's still in the kind of peak prime, like, play the young, beautiful. Like, I'm really excited to see, like, all of the range she has. Because, again, I think she's an amazing, amazing actor who
What
maybe.
could you cast her in? What's like the next? I feel like before the Suicide Squad movies, before Barbie was made, you could look at Margot Robbie and say Harley Quinn, Barbie. Even before those movies were made, is there anything else?
I wonder, it would be interesting to go back and look at her full catalog. Because I almost wonder if she's been limited by her looks to some degree. Because it would be very
like
hard
Brad
to
Pitt.
imagine her. Yeah, kind of like Brad Pitt. It would be very hard to imagine her playing somebody who isn't supposed to be beautiful.
Right. Who that's not part of this. at
Maybe
least
Tanya
subtext.
Harding, but they
Sure.
did a lot of makeup and stuff like that. So it would be interesting. Just like, I was going to say like the new Jennifer Lawrence movie where she just sort of plays like an older, but like still pretty, like whatever. Like, that's not the perfect comp, but it would be something. It would be really interesting to just like imagine her just in a movie where she's just supposed to be a normal woman. You'd kind of be like, oh my gosh, that's Margot Robbie.
Yeah.
And in some sense, maybe that's limiting to her. But I think as she gets older, maybe it will give her more range. When she isn't supposed to be like the hot young blonde, like Bond.
She could play a Trader Joe's cashier. They're always hot.
That they are.
Right, Jake?
That's right. We are all hot. But yeah, I guess Brad Pitt didn't get to play like normal guys until he got a little older. Like he plays the trainer in Burn After Reading. Have you guys seen Burn After Reading?
No,
I've wanted
this is
to
like
see
the
it.
third time that's come up in like a week.
Good.
It's one of Brad Pitt's best performances for sure. And he plays like a really average Joe.
He's in Snatch. I mean, he's not. I mean, he's a fighter, so he's like in good shape.
An
But he's like a
exceptional
very
fighter.
But he's like.
I think they have a really similar parallel, I think, in a lot of ways, as two actors.
Margot and
Brad.
Pitt. Yeah, I agree.
And
Anyway,
it's
so
just two of the
moving on
most
from
charismatic
Margot-
actors in the world.
Yes. So Barbie, the movie, not the character. What did you like really think of it?
So my biggest.
You rated it pretty low.
I gave it 3 stars.
I thought it was 2.5.
For a couple reasons. I gave it 3 stars.
Okay.
I like the movie. I probably won't ever watch it again, which is the biggest reason why I dropped it from 3.5 to 3, alongside the fact that I really liked the beginning. I liked the end. It felt like it was trying to do a lot of different things, and it was a little scattered. And like there was the Mattel stuff in the middle, and like obviously even in the final act when they do like include, this is a movie fundamentally made for women and daughter, like moms and daughters, and ultimately like not for me. And it was trying to do a lot of different things, not only throughout the whole film, but like even in the different chunks. So like the middle, like Mattel stuff, honestly, like the Ken battle situation, like some of that was just like a little all over the place for me. Even some of the ways that in some ways, I thought it stuck the landing, and the third act was quite good and really emotional and meaningful. And I realized I'm not the target demographic. Even it was trying to do a few different things with the different Barbies, speaking about like what was true to them as women, and then also the stuff with Ruth, the creator of Barbie, and like the montage with the Billie Eilish. It was just like a lot of different things that didn't feel super tight to me. The anchor of the film and what made it work so well, of course, was Margot, the mother and the daughter. Like it just felt like they had a lot of really good ideas, and it like got a little like blockbustery, just like things are happening, explosion of emotions to me. And I almost feel like they could have dialed it, like focused on the fundamentals a little bit. Even just the moment where they're bringing back the Barbies and they're talking about what it means to be a woman in the world. Like I thought that was really, really powerful. I thought stuff with the woman and daughter were powerful. But again, I don't know, like the Kens were fighting and they went into the dance scene. I get it. It's a Barbie movie. It's for kids partly, like, but it kind of lost. It just didn't feel that cohesive for me.
Jake?
Yeah, I thought it was well made. I thought it was funny, but like Jackson said, it clearly was not made for me. It almost made me feel a little bit bad.
Good. I feel like if it makes you feel bad, it's probably like
Then maybe,
intentional.
yeah. But yeah, I don't know.
Are you a Ken or are you an Alan?
Say what?
Are you a Ken or are you an Alan?
I'm an Alan.
Are you?
I thought there was only one Alan.
Yeah. There's only one Alan.
Is there actually an Alan as a toy?
Yeah, it was in
It was in the credits. Yeah, I didn't know that either.
Yeah, me neither. But
It was really funny. I'll give them that. There were definitely several times where I laughed really hard.
the humor was
Yeah.
solid. It was
Will Ferrell was really funny.
Will Ferrell was good. Although to
Of course, you're
Jackson's
gonna pick
point,
the one non-Barbie
of
that you
course,
thought was
the one
funny.
man got
of course,
it.
Jake.
No, I think that to Jackson's point, all the Mattel stuff was kind of clunky. I didn't feel necessary, and it felt really confusing, actually. Like the scene where they're running through Mattel, and they're just like not catching her. Like, is that just supposed to be like they're dumb? I really don't know. I really didn't understand any of the Mattel stuff, why it was in there.
It was in many ways. It was like it was a Greta Gerwig like social commentary movie that also needed to have the kids stuff for it to be
Yes.
like a Barbie movie.
Correct. Which
And
is fair. That
to
makes
their
sense.
credit, they did a pretty dang good job of that.
Kids are going to go see Barbie. That's the point.
In
And I
reality,
think-
this is not really a kids movie in any way. Like nothing about the plot is a kids movie,
Right.
Other than maybe the mom and the daughter. Like
no, I think it is. I think it is and it isn't. And it's actually like a pretty masterful blend of the two. I think it is a kid's movie in the fact that just look at it and experience it. And all of like the fight sequences, all the dance sequences. Like this is a movie that kids will enjoy.
Yeah.
For sure.
yeah,
But it has some deep subject matter that isn't throughout. Like it has all the deep scenes for me are the best scenes in the movie. All the scenes where Margot is just like really acting hard in not that she isn't on like the lighter stuff, but where she's really like just dialing it to 11 and it's all like tight on her face and you're just seeing the emotions. All of those scenes worked really well. Obviously the deep sort of
Also
like
the
hyper
base-
spiritual thing at the end worked the best for me.
I even thought the basic stuff was, to me, it was the middle stuff that I lost me because like apparently she called the either director or somebody involved in the Truman Show in trying to like understand how to like that. By the way, I thought the first
It was
third
very Truman
so
Show.
good.
Yeah.
Like
Oh, the first third
everything
was
they did
awesome.
about Barbie Land and like the structure and the weird vibes of like I thought that was all amazing. It was really the middle stuff where they went in the real world and they were trying to like explain a bunch of like that was where
For sure, the middle was the weakest part of the movie for me.
It wasn't clear. Like, yeah, I agree that it was a little scattered as far as what it was about because it was like her grappling with her fear of death. It was her grappling with the fact that the patriarchy exists in the real world and that Ken was bringing it back. And then I don't know.
It is a pretty interesting. So here's an attempt at getting to the message. I think it's an interesting perspective on these systems that we have socially and that we, to varying degrees, accept, but as a whole, accept as society. If we were to take a step back and look at them through a different lens, how we would frame those things if they were new to us. So if patriarchy were new, it would be devastating to women to realize that, as it is for Barbie in the real world. And it would be empowering for men, as it does for Ken. And what do women versus men do with that information? When men find out that society is about them, they become like the rulers and they turn the Barbies into their servants. When in Barbie land, when women are in charge of society, men are just kind of like there at the beach.
Right.
It's like
Their job is beach.
men have this need to dominate women, and women are more about like the in group versus the out group.
Not to mention, just like the whole point is to make you realize like this is kind of how the world sort of is. Like,
Yes,
and obviously
totally.
we made some progress. I think
Everything that like America Ferrera's monologue is literally just like Greta talking to the audience.
I think the other thing that was really powerful about it, that the one part also like some of the meta Mattel stuff that they kind of had to do is just like Barbie inherently, I have to imagine this is explained even in the mom's relationship to it, like in the kid and her daughter, like Barbie is this complicated thing. Barbie is this doll that in many ways like is like this symbol that kind of represents like stereotypes around men and women, but also maybe as like work to empower women. And I think like it wouldn't be shocking to me that most women who are above a certain age watching this like have somewhat of a complicated relationship to the symbol. Symbols are so important in our culture, and I thought they did a tasteful job of trying to like understand all of the nuance within that. And again, part of that is getting cynical. Like that is Mattel also trying to say like Barbie can be good again. Like it's a complicated thing, but I thought the way she did it, handled it with a lot of care. And like that felt maybe even more of like the pure personal distillation. Maybe we don't have the relationship. We don't have the relationship with Barbie specifically.
Right.
Both like literally and also as we're not women. But I think that was a cool way to think about the broader message, which is like, yes, we have all of these nuanced, complicated problems around the patriarchy and the fact that we have made progress, but we haven't made enough progress. And by the way, as a Greta Gerwig's, I don't know, late 30s, like how do I exist as an ambitious woman in the world who does want to be able to be at the top of my craft and driven, but also potentially be a mom and have like, there's so much there. So I really give her a lot of credit for like going into that and being able to get anything out that wasn't just a mess of complexity. And I thought there was a lot.
Has the Barbie toy in the past, I feel like the answer to this is yes, but like been criticized for setting unrealistic beauty standards?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
And do you think that that's part of the reason why they tried to make the movie go so like pro women, because they're trying to distance
I
themselves
think
from
that's
that criticism?
I think yes, but I don't think it was like a ploy or a tactic. I think that is what's interesting about it.
Yes.
And I think for a savvy and I think like genius filmmaker as Greta Gerwig, that's what she saw. She understood it. She understood what the dynamics were at play, and she made that movie.
Yes.
And so that's what to me is so impressive about it is Greta. Like this is not the same movie. It's obviously with Margot Robbie, it's a certain caliber of movie because she's incredible. Greta is what makes this movie what it is, I think. I'll end with this because I said this was my Letterboxd review, and what you thought I was going to say earlier. She basically made everything practical, which is so impressive. There's very few digital effects in this movie, which for a movie about a doll being in real life, any other filmmaker, any other studio, anyone else, this is like a Marvel CGI fest. But she made everything as practical as she could. The scene early in the movie where Barbie like steps out of her heel and her foot is still arched, which is like that was in the trailer. People were like, oh my God, that's awesome. 100% practical.
That's crazy.
Margot Robbie kept her foot.
Margot, there was a marker on the floor that was like sticky, so the heel would stay and her foot would come out. And then out of the shot, she's like holding onto a metal bar to stay up.
Wow.
And so it was like 100% in camera, 100% practical.
I think the last thing you said about Greta really resonates, which is in some sense you could see this film, one, just acknowledging like anyone, there are so many potential timelines of a Barbie movie.
Yes.
And this is the only one that comes out like this. And I think at some level, I have to imagine Greta Gerwig experiencing the complexity of all of this says she's almost making like a deal with the devil. That's an overstatement of what it is, but she is inherently making a compromise by saying, I am going to enter into all that this is and all the baggage it has. By the way, some of that is good. Some of that is positive memories. Some of that is all the stuff we just talked about. And I'm going to say, I'm going to go into this and try to say something that's really important to say here. Knowing also that I'm marketing Mattel and and I think that trade inherently is part of what makes it so interesting.
Yeah. That's
Margot too.
Marketing Mattel. I hadn't even really thought of that. Because to me, it was like,
It's a commercial
marketing
act.
Barbie. Well, yeah, I guess at the theater I was at, they were selling Barbie dolls for $70. So I was like, oh my God.
Wow.
You can't look at this without the commercial end of it.
Yeah,
and that's what,
true.
Yeah.
So, one last thing. Interesting that in both the Barbie movie and the Lego movie, Will Ferrell plays like the boss guy.
Yeah.
He's just a CEO.
So is Will Ferrell good? 2025, Will Ferrell stars in Furby.
If they make a Furby movie, I will not
they
be
make a
seeing
Furby
it or
movie, it's over.
podcasting about it.
All right, let's transition here to Oppenheimer.
Are we going to
And
do
I
any of
think
our sections on Barbie
Well,
or
I
no?
think let's do awards for Oppenheimer, because I think if we do it for both, it's going to feel a little bit redundant and repetitive. So I like that Barbie was a little bit more free flowing. Also, we should kind of caveat all of our Barbie conversation by saying that we're three men, and it would have been better if we had a woman with us to talk about Barbie.
Yeah.
But we're just hanging out today.
I don't think we're claiming anything other than...
I was going to. I had a friend who I was going to ask to be on it. But this timing-wise, this is what
I have some feminine qualities.
I have a lot of feminine qualities, apparently. Maybe we should include that in here.
Yeah.
So Dylan, our friend Dylan, texted our group chat before we saw these movies and said, of the five of us, which is most likely to prefer Barbie over Oppenheimer? And Jackson immediately responded, lads, easiest question ever. Which is true. I did do karaoke the other night in a Barbie t-shirt singing Taylor Swift. So
Were you expecting to like Barbie more than Oppenheimer?
no, I was
Alternatively,
expecting
this
to
is my
think
hat.
that they were incredibly different movies.
Yeah.
And they were. So let's transition to Oppenheimer.
I should have had this
Let's
hat
get
on the
our
whole time.
segments out. Before our segments, though, letterbox reviews. Start with that. Jake,
On
did you
Barbie?
do one?
I didn't do one.
I saw that you liked mine, but
Yeah, I did.
you didn't write one of your own.
I did not.
Jackson, start with yours.
On Barbie or Oppenheimer?
Barbie's over.
Okay. Barbie's over. I gave Oppenheimer 5 stars. My review was not eloquent, but I just wrote how I was feeling. Basically speechless, a singular film experience. Thank you, Cillian Murphy. Sorry, excuse me. Thank you for Christopher Nolan. Thank you to many others. More thoughts to come. And then I pulled a quote that I thought was very meaningful. But I'll bring that up later in our quote section.
Yeah. Quotes come up later. Can you pull up mine?
Yes.
I've been saying, I'll start by this while you pull it up. Right now, it's sitting at a 5 for me. I have been teetering between 5 and 4.5, only because, well, one, I'll start by saying this movie breaks scales. Like, it doesn't make sense to put a scale on this movie for a lot of reasons that we'll get into. I gave it a 5 just because that felt initially like the right reaction. 5s I usually say for like my favorite movies ever. I don't know if this is one of my favorite movies ever. I don't even know if it's my favorite Christopher Nolan movie. It's probably the best Christopher Nolan movie. But anyway,
Really?
5 stars. I said undeniable. There are some glaring issues that I'll save for the pod. Here we are. But I think this might be one of the most important movies ever made. Did I like it? I don't know. Am I devastated? I believe I am. That's how I feel.
I think I would have given it 4 stars.
Really?
Yeah,
Ooh.
because I think I like it for all the same reasons you do, but I thought that the third act got a little slow for me.
It did get
I got
slow.
a little. Maybe it's my ADD, but I got a little like, all right, can I go home now? Like, let's wrap this up.
I kind of appreciated that the third act did slow down because it forced me to stay in my seat for a little longer, and it forced me to think about the themes of the film, not just the bomb itself, not just the Trinity test. And it made the weight of the last line hit a little harder.
The last line was
because
great.
I had to wait for it. And because I had to wait for it, I had to sit there and think about what it all meant, like on a bigger level. Because that's what the third act is meant to be like. Oh, this is what humans do. This is what people do when they wield power, or when they have. I mean, very similar. I said when we were walking out, like 2001: A Space Odyssey is a good double feature for this movie. It'll make you really depressed, but it's like very similar thematically, which is that when humans create a weapon, they use it to destroy each other. So the fact that RDJ's character and Cillian Murphy's character, the fact that they were back and forth, like destroying each other, was helpful in making that last line land.
Okay.
To me.
Can you mute that? The movie split into 3 acts. We're going straight into spoilers. And the bomb goes off for the first Trinity test at the end of the second act. And so I think that's kind of what you're getting at, which is to say it's told in classic Christopher Nolan style where you're weaving in and out of timelines, and then they did something I thought was, I was talking with Dylan about it. I think maybe mixed reviews. I thought made it unbelievable, which was the color scenes, which is most of the film, are clearly, and I think literally written in the screenplay from Oppenheimer's first person perspective. And then the black and white scenes, which are spliced in throughout, are unclear whether it's truly objective or more from Strauss's perspective. I think it's more like a traditional film perspective rather than directly.
Was that the black and white was the objective truth
Yes.
in what was like previously written about Oppenheimer's life and about these events.
And it makes sense that you can tell they give hints. There's a scene where Oppenheimer's being deposed, and he literally has Florence Pugh's character appear on him. He becomes naked. It's very clear that the color scenes are his first person perspective. So anyway, they're weaving throughout. The timelines are jumping all around. And the bomb goes off at the end of the second act, which is, as you said, I think totally changes the structure. As the first 2/3 of the movie, you're weaving in and around the lead up to the are we going to set the bomb off?
Yeah.
And as you say, the third act totally changes in tone. It becomes much slower. It's really just the deposition, jumping back and forth. But I read a quote from Christopher Nolan that I thought really summed up things well, and maybe why I liked the third scene so much, which is, he says, ultimately, this is a film about consequences. And I don't think this movie is really, I mean, inherently it's a biopic. I don't think it's about explicitly the atomic bomb. I think it's a film, as he says, about the consequences and the complexities and the nuance of men who find themselves, like, you even just think about, like, there's so much morality wrapped up in this. Is Oppenheimer good? Is Oppenheimer bad? Was Truman good? Like, was it right to drop the bomb? Did it, like, you think about we all grew up talking about things like this, and inherently we are all American, like, we all come in with baggage, but you think about, was it right to drop the bomb because it saved more American or Japanese lives? Like, all of these questions come down to intents and consequences. And I thought they did such a fantastic and beautiful job of, like, pulling that all apart. Christopher Nolan has some intention here, but I don't think he's too heavy-handed in exactly how you should feel. And this is really why, to me, the movie works so well. And I think, long-winded way of saying, I'm sorry, but I think that, to me, is why the third act worked so well. Is it was a hand to say, actually, this isn't just about the development of this crazy bomb.
Yeah.
You needed that space, as you said, afterwards to sit with it and see it became a political warfare, like, ideology thing for another guy getting a Congress seat 18 years later. And that's how anyway, I could go on.
No, I think you're spot on. I think without the third act, this movie is about a big explosion.
Yes.
And the explosion is like the climax of the film. But the way that it is now, the climax of the film, actually, I think structurally, if you're looking at the film, the climax is when what's his name, Flass, the Casey Affleck's character.
Oh yeah.
When his character realizes that Strauss was pulling the strings the whole time. When
Not Casey Affleck. You're thinking of the guy who was Han Solo.
Yes, that is who that was. Okay, cool. Thank you.
Casey Affleck plays the agent.
Right. Okay.
The guy who's in the room.
Yeah. So when Han Solo,
his name is
brings him the Time magazine, right, and realizes that he's been pulling strings the whole time. I actually think that's the climax of the movie, structurally. I actually think that is when everything turns and you realize the relationship between Strauss and Oppenheimer and the change there. And so many things come together in that moment of, why are we interspersing this with these Cold War, like, proceedings or whatever? All of it has been leading to this moment of destroying each other and,
by the way,
wielding power.
You're kind of sitting there before then wondering if Oppenheimer is the villain.
Yeah.
And we all were trying to say, who's the hero, who's the villain. The whole point of this movie is there's no heroes and there's no villains.
Yeah.
Right.
There are intents and there are consequences.
So I think, yes, put another way, the point of the movie is, how do you reconcile society's need, man's need, not society's need. How do you reconcile man's need to destroy each other with our ever-evolving and changing relationship with tribe? Who's your tribe? Who are you okay destroying? Who are you okay destroying if who you are destroying is the entire world?
Right.
And it's what's so brilliant about, and it clearly it's based. One of the things I also heard is that this is actually at least the author of American Prometheus, who the original biopic or biography, said it was like incredibly accurate, like both to the book
like
and
the most
history.
accurate, yeah.
Oppenheimer being a potential communist perfectly illustrates the point you just made.
Right.
That's
why that's in the movie.
He is, and the conclusion, at least I got from it, is he is someone who is truly deeply American and truly deeply earnestly has these complex views that made it
ideologies.
Study Trumbo, McCarthyism, all of it, and he is both of those things. And how do we reconcile those? And he's a guy trying his best, seemingly, to make the right decision for him and his values and the people. Like, he is clearly not someone who is ideologically driven by destruction, but also thinks that, like, and by the way, they get to this. A huge part of the drive for the atomic bomb clearly was, this is so terrifying and so dark, but better us than the Nazis. And then they wipe out the Nazis and they still use the bomb.
Correct. But the way he justifies it to himself is, well, they're going to do it, so we have to.
I think the way Killian justifies it to himself at the end of the day is that he is someone who, like Strauss, wants power, but he wants intellectual power, not actionable power. He wants to be the one who made it. He wants to, I think he just earnestly is curious about physics and just wants to be the one to discover these things. But he doesn't realize until too late what that means. And I think what he is confronted with, I want you to sit in this because I'm really excited to hear what you have to say, but I want to finish this thought. I think he is confronted with, there are different levels of who your tribe is, who you protect. You can protect the entire world by not creating an H-bomb, right? Ultimately, at the end of the movie, that's what he's like confronted with. Making the A-bomb is going to lead to creating an H-bomb, which would incinerate the earth. Do you protect the world? Do you protect your ideology? Are you a communist and that's who you side with? Do you protect your nation, which is like a level under that? Are you an American? Or do you protect yourself? And that's what Strauss does. I think Strauss and Oppenheimer, in terms of looking at this as a film, those two characters, their motivations, their fears, and who they are as a character are completely opposed in the sense that Strauss cares about himself. Strauss wants to preserve himself. Oppenheimer wants to preserve the human race.
It's like the bottom of the hierarchy of needs and the top of the hierarchy of needs.
And in between is everything that we think life is about. We think it's about, are you communist? Are you American? We think it's the nuance of in between, but really fundamentally, what life is about is, do you protect humanity or do you protect yourself? Which one is what matters? That's the opposition of those two characters.
Oppenheimer's flaw clearly, as it's portrayed, is that he wasn't looking out for himself enough, and that doesn't make him a his good or a bad person, because he what this inherently the subject matter and what I think the film does such an amazing job of is, it's easy to come in with takes about how a topic like this is so obvious and it's so black and white moralistically, and there are aspects of it certainly that are, but I think what it does a good job of is Oppenheimer is so his motivations seem like they could be clear cut, but they're so complex, and yet the consequences can be very black and white. And I think that's where it's the inversion of what we would think, maybe. And I think that's the other thing. There's one other point I want to make, which I thought was really good, which is like, I was thinking like, because it's written in first person and because it's so subjective, you're not really experiencing a study of a character. You're experiencing his experience. You're seeing the world through his eyes. Yes. I was listening to Sean Fennessy said on a podcast.
Oh, I loved his quote.
It's a portal and not a portrait. I think Oppenheimer is our eyes to wade into all of the consequences and intents and nuances and everything you talked about and have to feel them all. It would be so much less interesting if Oppenheimer were clearly a hero or clearly a villain, because what I think the great act of this filmmaking does is it puts you in that seat, and you are some of the most emotional parts of that scene, the movie. You're sitting there and he's in the court scene and the people are cheering because they've blown up Hiroshima, and you have that on one hand, and then you feel you have Oppenheimer's visions and the sounds and the skin melting off the woman's face. Right. it puts you in his seat, and it says hey, feel this. And man, it was so heavy.
I think based on what you just said, like the consequences, I want to propose a question that I think this film proposes based on my understanding of it, my reading of it that I just explained of like self versus humanity and how the scale, or it would be more appropriate to put it this way instead of this way. If the scale is from self versus the entire world, and along that scale is like communism over here and America over here, right? America being like a very individualistic, self-centered nation of just a lot of its values of how it's founded. And that's why America as like as a concept, as an ideology versus communism are fundamentally opposed. Is this question presenting the question that I will present now, that does the protection of self cause the destruction of the else and vice versa? Does protection of us cause the destruction of me? And does the protection of me cause the destruction of us? Yeah, I think that's the question proposed by the movie. I think the question proposed by the movie, because with Oppenheimer being a fascinating, stuck in the middle person, as a communist physicist, as a communist scientist, because let's just be real, like a lot of the movie is about is he not, but what we see, like all of his friends are communists. He's there with them all.
Right.
He's a communist. Yeah. He has the books. Like he at least is, and he even when he's confronted, he doesn't outright deny it. He says like, I believe in this and this. Like he at least thinks about it, right? So and from what he says of like, we need to give this information to the Russians, like we need to share this information so we don't all destroy the world. I think that he is so caught in between these ideologies of self versus us.
I think I'm a little biased because I just finished this book series that's about sort of uses the idea of nuclear armistice as a metaphor for all kinds of cosmic level questions, called the three-body problem. And one of the ideas that I might be pulling from that, but it feels really present here, is it's easy to potentially draw that line. I think what technology and ambition do is they can, I keep coming back to this, but they shift it from being about intent to being about consequences.
Yes.
And what I mean by that is, think about
true.
the simplest prisoner's dilemma. No matter how good your intent is, the optimal way to play the prisoner's dilemma is to be zero sum, is to be selfish. No matter, if you do the math, the optimal way is to be selfish. And you think about nuclear armistice. Oppenheimer finds himself afterwards. Originally, his frame is, we have to be selfish because if the Nazis get the bomb, it's the worst case scenario, so we have to build the bomb before the Nazis get it. And then later, when it comes to the Russians, who maybe he's a little more sympathetic to, he says, actually, let's meet, let's tell them we know what it is, but neither of us should build it. And in fact, the only optimal way to play, if you are being self-preservationist, is to build the H-bomb. Because if they get to the H-bomb first, you lose. It's prisoner's dilemma. And I think that's what is really, and that's, by the way, what makes these things so much more challenging and complicated. It's easy to draw the moral high ground, but you're going to tell me, by the way, if you're the president of the United States and your goal first and foremost is to protect your country, it's just an easy decision to say like, oh no, we can't build the H-bomb because it could blow up the world. No, because rationality goes against love in some sense there. And I think that is what, in the micro or the macro, I think the way you framed it is it's self and me and us.
Yeah. Me and us.
But
that's the
me
question.
or us.
Yes, but when it's me or us, the question is, who is us? I know who me is. I know who I am. I know how to protect myself. I know how to be selfish.
But how far
when
out do you
it's
extend
us,
the
how
us?
far do you extend it? Because like example you just gave of like, if Truman is thinking as the leader of America, sure, then America is self.
Yes.
But what about if who I'm trying to preserve is the entire planet?
But by the way, we
Then
are
that's
now
us
not to zoom
and
out a little
self.
bit. We are soon entering a world a lot of people have made comparisons between AI and nuclear bombs.
Yes,
take whatever technology you want to make.
Yeah.
We are entering a world where the party lines and the power who can control these things are not just nations.
Exactly.
Or giant political ideologies. It could be small groups. It could be individuals. And we are entering, and technology and ambition, again, make us fundamentally face the truth that intents do not equal consequences all the way down the line. Just because you have good intentions, as it seems based on this movie, Robert Oppenheimer mostly did, even though it was complicated and he had his own personal ambitions, all these things wrapped in them. He found himself in a position where he couldn't unwind it. This is obviously we're getting to the end of the movie and what he says to Einstein, but
Einstein.
Gosh.
So you know what's interesting too is we're talking about, or I largely have been talking about like self versus others. Combining that with something you said about how he was selfish when it was the Nazis might get a bomb, but he was less selfish when it was we need to talk to the Russians.
More his tribe.
Who is more his tribe. And why are the Nazis not his tribe? Because he's Jewish.
Right.
He was confronted with someone else being like probably the most selfish person in history, Hitler, in the sense that we're talking about of what selfish means.
Right.
And yet Hitler even still had his own line of us and me and them.
Exactly.
Fundamentally, everything Hitler did was about scapegoating some group of people to preserve his group of people and have power within it.
Yes. And what that did is that made Oppenheimer, it made America the other, the not us. Right. So Hitler's destructiveness, led to Oppenheimer's destructiveness.
We haven't even talked about it, and we should have sooner, but think about Japan in this.
Yes.
The reason this was justified is because Japan was an evil enough them that threatened us, and we didn't think about the us within them.
Correct.
The us, the normal civilians with it really is.
Even though whoever was he like chief of staff, the guy who basically makes the call, like okay, make it in July.
He's
like, oh, my wife and I
the saddest line in the movie
in Kyoto.
Are you
kidding me? That's devastating.
That was the single most emotionally gutting part of the whole film.
Yeah.
Because he gets to it too. They're talking about which cities in Japan they can bomb. And he starts by saying, oh, we have to close off. I'm taking off Kyoto because it's a historically relevant la, 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 la. And also, me and my wife went there on honeymoon. And thus, it is real to us as human beings and not an idea or a distant place. And that's why we can't bomb them.
It was a lens into, in a funny way, and this will be a segue for us. It was kind of a lens into one of I think the biggest flaws of the movie. It was a lens into that line being so devastating of a character showing their lack of empathy in that, again, this thing of only caring about self. I think that there not being any perspective at all of, like, there's not a single Japanese person in the movie, but not even any kind of representation of that. The only time where the main character is shown to have empathy in the sense of seeing the consequences of his actions are in relation to seeing the people in front of him, the Americans in front of him, being incinerated in his mind. Like you mentioned earlier, the woman in the front row and like her skin peeling off. I get it. Why did that, like, if you want to really go there, make that a Japanese person?
Yeah.
So I think here's my argument. And I think there are plenty of merit to what you're saying. The strongest argument, which doesn't make it valid, but I think the reason the choice was made is fundamentally this was a movie that was Oppenheimer's perspective. I don't think it would have made sense for him to see. By the way, I think one fair reading of this is that Oppenheimer didn't care about the Japanese. If anything, he had more empathy for the ideological, like esoteric version of all of the world than he had for the 100,000 Japanese people he killed. And I think that was part of what you were supposed to take from it.
That's fair.
It would have felt a little bit. Again, I think he's even listing off like, oh, I only killed 70,000, and then there were like another 100,000 after. Like, By the way, I think that's part of what's supposed to be taken here is that this guy, and I think I don't have full expertise here. I think part of the historical context at the time was that the Japanese were this almost like, at least to the Americans, like barbarian civilization that would never surrender, and that was this kind of like brutal land war, and they are a different thing than the Nazis, but like that context, I think it would feel a little forced to like lift that up and have like Oppenheimer see Japanese people that he suddenly has empathy for. Like, I think you're supposed to read it that way.
How do you feel about not seeing the bomb?
Well, we do see them piecing it together.
No. I mean, like
the detonation of
the detonation, Hiroshima,
right.
Nagasaki. We don't see that.
Yeah, I don't. So I would say the same two things. By the way, I'm not saying that this is fully justified, and I am definitely sympathetic to people who have different experiences than me, or certainly a Japanese person having their own read of this. I can only speak about my own experience. It was supposed to be Oppenheimer's perspective, number one. Yep. And two, I had many moments in this film where I was deeply emotionally distraught. And I don't think I needed to witness it like in that frame to fully get it or something.
Sure. I think all of that is fair, and I think the movie is still effective in all of those things. It just feels a little strange on a different scale, like from a different lens. Like if I'm zooming out and I'm thinking back on this movie 20 years from now, I think I'm probably going to be like, why weren't there
was a
Japanese
historical
people in that
omission.
movie? I think it's a historical omission, and I think it's not going to age well. Another thing I think is not going to age well, as does not age well in any Nolan films that I want to talk about. Whether you guys want to talk about it, we can have whatever conversation you're comfortable with, but especially this being a Barbenheimer pod and the other film we talked about being so like aggressively pro women in a great way. This movie is very Nolan in its just awful portrayal of women. Nolan cannot figure it out, and it seems like will never. It seems like he just hates women. Honestly, he has not once in his entire filmography written a compelling woman, written a woman who has any lines of dialogue that are not about the main character man of the film. He just doesn't read. The closest thing he ever did to giving a woman any kind of agency or character was Anne Hathaway in Interstellar. That was like the closest thing, and I guess Murph.
Anne Hathaway?
But even Murph.
You mean Jessica Chastain?
No, I mean Anne Hathaway, who's like on the ship with him. Yeah. Also Jessica Chastain, sure, but even Jessica Chastain's entire character is, my dad left me.
Yeah.
That's her entire character. At least Anne Hathaway's character is like considering the weight of not being home and like missing out on her entire life. He doesn't do anything close to that. Like he doesn't do for any of his women characters what he does for his always male leads. And he doesn't give them any kind of autonomy as characters. All of Emily Blunt's lines in this film,
stand up for yourself.
Yes, all of her lines are an external, internal dialogue for Oppenheimer. That's her entire role as a character. That's all Nolan does with women. He makes them external, internal dialogues, and that's just like pretty shitty.
I think there's a little bit of strength. I think there's a little bit of strength to her character, particularly towards the end in the interactions in both the deposition and with some of the people, where she had strength in a way that Oppenheimer didn't. It was still true.
That one
him.
moment was great, and that's that's probably the most positive perspective of women that Nolan has done is when she's in the room, and like even the guy who's on the board, I think she was the one who convinced the guy on the board, because he ends up being the one who votes in Oppenheimer's favor.
Yeah.
I think she was the one who convinced him, because he like laughs at her joke or whatever. So there is that one moment, but other than that, I mean,
it's a shame, because like of all the movies that I would be super critical of it, like this and Dunkirk, it's like, okay, whatever, it's a historic, like based on a biography. I think the problem is, as you say, seen in the broader context of everything Nolan has done, it's just, I was more okay with Emily Blunt's character, particularly for a couple of the reasons I said. Like Florence Pugh's character is just like it's kind of like a brutally empty. Like,
are you guys familiar with the term fridging?
No.
Fridging, no.
So it's funny because it's actually based on like my all-time favorite comic book hero. But Green Lantern in the 90s, he he was a character who was given the power ring of Green Lantern. This is not a comic book episode, so I'm going to try to figure out how to do this without giving too much like inside baseball. Basically, there's a comic book character, Green Lantern, and when he gets his powers, he's like, I don't know what to do with this power. He's like, doesn't know who he is, and his like main villain, his first main villain, kills his girlfriend and chops her up and puts her in a fridge. And he like at the end of the issue opens the fridge and is like, oh my God. And that motivates his character to be a hero. And
That's dark.
yeah, the term fridging comes from that moment of a woman being used as
a
incentive
literal object
for the man, as like the motivator for the man.
Yeah.
Nolan, whether or not he kills women in his movies, he always fridges them.
How did he fridge him in this movie?
They are only motivation for Oppenheimer or external internal dialogue.
But how do they?
So Florence Pugh is motivation for Oppenheimer in one way or another, in multiple different ways, actually. Motivation for him. That's her entire character. Emily Blunt's character exists only to tell him what he's not telling himself. That's her entire purpose.
Right.
So I think Nolan is probably like the biggest director most guilty of fridging.
You got some good actresses to play these vapid roles.
Yeah.
Some very, very good actresses.
Because, yeah, you're right. And that's interesting. I don't know what the takeaway is about that. That's interesting. He is Christopher Nolan.
I think it's a little unfair to just totally. I thought Katie Oppenheimer was an interesting character, despite it was weak and.
Let me be clear. The women who played these roles, like the actors who played these roles, did a great job and was like really well done. Glad they're in the movie. There's also, which is funny even to say this sentence as a positive, but the third woman in the movie of all three, she also did a good job. The one who's a scientist. I feel like that was like Nolan. She had 2 lines. One of them was, "I'm actually a scientist. They didn't teach typing at MIT." I feel like that
the
was
other one's
literally
about not getting kicked off because because of like the nuclear radiation on reproductivity.
Yeah, exactly. So I think her character was. I think Nolan shoehorned that in to be like, "See, guys, I don't hate women."
Yeah, but I mean,
I don't think he hates women. He just clearly doesn't understand women.
Yes.
Anyway.
Yes.
Were there any female scientists building the bomb in the 1940s?
Again,
Probably not.
This would not be the movie I would like rip apart
question.
to be critical of.
Correct.
It's in the broader context.
Yeah, I just thought similar to how we recorded an episode about Midnight in Paris, and I was like, we got to say something about Woody Allen. I think in this we have to say something about Christopher Nolan's relationship.
Laz, you're so woke, man. What is? You're gonna get a bunch of angry tweets.
It is the official stance of this pod that Woody Allen is innocent.
Nope. Okay, so
save the controversial thing for the end.
Can we talk a little?
All right, let's do categories now.
And then we can talk about the ending. Because I thought the ending, I have a few things on the ending.
Oh, same. Categories. Tom Brady Award for exceeded expectations. I mean, this movie breaks this award. It's everybody.
Yeah,
it's like everybody shows up for one scene. It's like, oh my God, that's that guy.
No,
I thought Gary Oldman did a really good job as Truman.
This is the only time the Tom Brady Award actually makes any sense, which is you come in. This guy is the whole point of the whole thing. He's already the superstar. He's the title. He's everything. And yet he still somehow delivers. Cillian Murphy, Best Actor 2024. Oh my gosh.
Didn't you expect that though?
No.
So you're saying you expected it, and it's still like this is Tom Brady between Super Bowls 5 and 6.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Fair enough.
Yes. Which is the only version of the Tom Brady Award that makes any sense.
Well, here's another version of it. The Tom Brady, and we'll talk about that, but I'll throw mine out there too, and then we'll talk about them. My version of it is the Tom Brady Award between Drew Bledsoe goes down and he goes into the game and becomes the new starter. And that is the guy who played Albert Einstein. Holy shit, what a hard role. Come be one of the most recognizable humans in human history for 3 scenes and be convincing. That is so hard.
And he did.
And he was great.
He was great.
Unbelievable.
The other underrated acting role that I think this movie is just literally full. You can say a million, but you made the point. Aaron Aldenreich. That's his name.
That's what I was going to say.
Oh, that's the
He was so good.
Yeah, he was good.
He's good in everything.
It's a
He's
small
great
role,
actor.
but so good.
It was an important role.
Also, like, can we just like Benny Safdie's in it? Josh Peck is in it. Like
Kenneth Branagh.
Kenneth Branagh is great. How about Gary Oldman playing weird Harry Truman? Like, it was crazy. It was really crazy. Okay, sorry.
So
next category.
crazy. Jake, did you have one?
Mine was the guy Gary Oldman as Truman.
Gary Oldman as Truman.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God, what a scumbag.
But that's like that doesn't fit the category at all. That's like a random cameo that is good acting.
I think if
This is the thing is talking.
Turn it off. Stop.
Okay, there we go.
this is the last time I give you an iPad.
Man does not know. All
right, Leo
Cillian
DiCaprio?
Murphy was so unbelievable.
Go ahead, talk about Cillian.
Just like this is not what you. Obviously, he's the whole point of the whole movie, but he plays this role that has so much complexity, so much subtlety, so much like he on one hand has to be this unbelievably charismatic sort of central figure who's recruiting people. He has to play a whole bunch of different ages. He has to play this guy who is sort of like plagued for 20 years by the complexities inside his mind that start off as this artistic wonder and turn into like despair and destruction. I genuinely do not think the movie works at all in any way, despite all of the other accomplishments, including Christopher Nolan, the script, everyone else acting, this beautiful score, the cinematography. I do not think the movie works without him. I think
True. It's also so impressive because it's a completely internal process for the character until the last line. And that's part of why the last line has so much weight is that there's no scene where he's like, what have I done? Not a single line of dialogue where he's like, but what about, and it's not because he's not thinking about those things.
Yes. You know it the whole time.
You can see it on the
script
actor.
is written in the first person and Cillian Murphy somehow just takes it perfectly. Like, I think it's genuinely one of the better acting performances I have ever witnessed. I think it is so underrated. I think it will go down in history as being deeply underrated right now. I do not think the movie I think the movie completely fails if it isn't for him.
Yeah.
You know, I'm coming around to that because when we were talking about this off pod, I was saying that I thought Robert Downey Jr. was at the same caliber, if not higher. But
He's great.
I think as I reflect on it, I think that Downey's performance in his scenes with Cillian are sensational, are like way transcend his scenes without Cillian, because the scenes with Cillian, when you see the two of them go back and forth, the subtlety of what Downey communicates in his face, I think can only come from two actors who are like in that moment together. And so I think there's some of the reflection of Oppenheimer's sun bouncing off the moon of Downey is what I was saying. But I think ultimately you're right that Cillian was just transcendent.
By the way, Downey's incredible. This is a movie that is over 3 hours long that Cillian Murphy is probably in 2 hours and 45 minutes of. Yeah. And the most breathtaking parts of the entire movie, like all 7 of them, are us just looking at him.
Yeah,
his
in
face
IMAX
is the most interesting.
Yeah, it's
just
the fact that
his
this is a movie of like 99% dialogue and 1% one explosion. It's all and it's in IMAX.
It's
like you have to see this in giant film stock. Is so impressive.
It's just looking at his face, the subtle acting of him channeling the last hour of emotions we just talked about, and this man just holding it in his eyes. It is masterful work. Yeah. You should win Best Actor.
Downey too.
I agree.
I want Downey to win Best Supporting, like for sure.
He was really great.
For
really
sure. People are kind of jokingly saying Ryan Gosling for Barbie, but Downey should win Supporting. This is one of the more obvious supporting wins I've ever seen. If Downey doesn't win Supporting, I can't picture something beating that.
The one thing I'll say about the Downey thing is
fair enough, but we're more than
Downey's
halfway through the year.
It's much more of a traditional, like, that was a great actor doing a great role in a great movie in a way that wins Best Supporting Actor. I have seen very, very few roles that are like what Cillian Murphy did.
True. Yeah.
Here.
True. There are very few roles written like that.
The movie does not work without him at all. You could say the same thing about Margot and Barbie.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which I think is also true. But I just do not think you could do this movie in any way without what he did.
Speaking of actors, another actor I love, Leonardo DiCaprio. The Leonardo DiCaprio Award for a moment that makes you point at the screen.
For me, it was honestly just the scene where he's like this. Like,
of his face, because that was the trailer.
That meme too many times where he's just like
brooding.
You got such big eyes. Mine was when they said Heisenberg.
Yeah.
When they were talking, I was like,
good.
oh, that's the actual Heisenberg.
That was really good. Mine is, seeing Albert Einstein on screen for sure. Yeah. Also, the roughly 78 times they said the word Oppenheimer. They said for the first hour of the movie, They said Oppenheimer so many times.
Oh, really?
How
It
about
was
just
so
him
funny.
with a fedora on, smoking like with a cigarette in his mouth,
or like the
walking?
first time when the other guy's like, "Stop wearing that suit," and you gotta wear what you would wear, and then he gets a fedora. It's like this is an intentional branding choice. I like it. It's cute. It's like it's very Barbie esque.
How about this? Do you have any of those moments with Florence Pugh?
There was a moment.
What did you say when we walked out of the movie?
I said? I'm just glad I got to see Florence Pugh's boobs.
There you have it.
There it is.
Keep it going.
Yeah.
Talk to me, Goose. Quotable lines. Jackson has one.
Okay. This is the penultimate line of the film, I believe. So there's this amazing setup where Strauss has been stressed out the whole movie because he thinks Oppenheimer said something to Einstein that ruined his reputation. And then Aaron Alderrick's character says, "Oh, maybe they talked about something more important than you." And
So good.
there's a line we'll get to that I think is really important, which is the whole point of the movie. But there's a line just before it that I thought was even more powerful and maybe even more summed up what the experience of this movie was, where Einstein says he's talking to him about how they're all going to come, or excuse me, he experiences the fact that people thought he couldn't carry on, Einstein couldn't carry on with what he had started. And then people come back and they apologize and whatever. And he says, this will happen to you. And he says, just remember when they apologize, it won't be for you. It will be for them. And what I took from that line, at least, by apologizing, by trying to understand who Robert Oppenheimer is, by trying to understand the nuances, was he good? Was he evil? Was he justified? We're trying to get out from the guilt it puts on ourselves.
Trying to absolve ourselves.
And I think that is a recurring, often devastating, and pretty universal human behavior that we are still turning over in all different contexts, in big and small questions today. And I think that's what the movie's about.
Amen.
My quotable line is the line after that, the ending. I mean, I just can't stop thinking about it. I came to you with calculations that said if we set off the bomb, we might destroy the world.
It started a chain reaction that would destroy the world.
Start a chain reaction that would destroy the world. That's right. And Einstein says, and what of it? And he says, I believe we did.
Yeah, that was the best line of the movie. But I'm going to go with now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds.
Is that because
While a naked Florence Pugh is leaning over him?
Yes.
Okay.
To go back to Laz's quote for a second, I have two thoughts on it. Number one, obviously, something that's probably hard for us to even fully experience is we live in a mostly peaceful world, relatively, of course, obviously. Americans and Soviets and people all over the world lived for 50 years in fear of the world ending on a dime because of a maniacal or self-preservationist powerful guy pushing a button. And that fear hasn't totally gone away, and I think there's a lot of that still remains there. But I thought there were two versions of it that I thought were even more interesting potentially, as we aren't really in the era of like nuclear fear anymore. One was a quote from a review I read. I think it was in Vulture. I was kind of surprised. I thought it was really powerful, and it was very personal to Oppenheimer. It says, Nolan's closing images do serve as a warning and a portent of doom, and they are enormously moving as such. But they're also one final glimpse into this character, revealing that in his mind, at least, he has destroyed the world. He has destroyed his world, his very conception of reality, where once he saw the astonishing connections that lay at the heart of all matter and even human relations. You think about the scene where he's touching Kitty, explaining nuclear physics, touching their hands together. Now he sees only horror and fire of the destructive power that lies beneath the shape of all things. And then I think the other takeaway I had is and again, this is probably partly coming from me just reading the Three Body Problem, but many, many years from now, hundreds of years from now, maybe thousands of years from now, maybe silly, maybe the world will be over, you could potentially point back to Robert Oppenheimer and the Manhattan Project as the beginning of man having the power of God. And what I mean by that is having a lever on civilizational creation and destruction. What truly going down to the quantum level did is it allowed man to start playing on an axis that was never possible before. There was never an ability for man to destroy civilization.
Right.
It was never conceivable. You think about Genghis Khan, the most ambitious, violent, tyrannical people. In a year, they could wipe out maybe part of a nation. And now you get the power of one man with the press of a button to create or to destroy on a cosmic level, on a civilizational level. And to me, that is really the takeaway, much more than so than nuclear bombs, of the chain reaction that is going to probably ultimately set us to our demise.
Yes.
On some time.
Yes.
And I think that is a... We're having these conversations this year
with AI.
About AI.
Yeah.
Pick the topic. There will never be a version of humanity that doesn't have this lens on it anymore. It will never exist.
Yes.
We are tumbling towards a world where one person in a dorm room has the unlimited creative and destructive power on whatever axis. Maybe it's nuclear. Maybe it's something else in quantum physics. Maybe it's AI. Maybe it's something else in technology. And I think it's an interesting lens to think about this moment actually being the beginning of that happening. I think it's not a coincidence that the name of the biography is American Prometheus.
Yeah.
And we're still wrestling with this. We will never be able to, and I don't mean to be doomer. I'm probably more optimistic, especially with technology, than most people. I don't think this technology only has to be destructive. And I say this technology in the abstract sense. But we now have to deal with these questions in perpetuity. The us versus the them, the who, the tribe. Are we citizens of the earth? Are we citizens of our country? Are we citizens of the cosmos? Like, are we potentially going to have to answer those questions?
With aliens? Yeah, who knows?
Fun fact, most UFO sightings started in 1947 and then continued since then. So there are those who theorize that perhaps the detonation of the nuclear bomb is what...
the wake-up call.
It was the wake-up call that made them aware of us. Or at least made them deem us worthy of visiting.
Whoa. I wish I was high to receive that information. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Whoa.
All the UFO sightings started in 1947. So let's say maybe it took them 2 years to get over here or whatever.
When you give man the power of the gods, the power of God, like, you can't, I can't help but keep coming back to it. It's so easy, and there will be, and I get, for example, the criticisms you made about the lack of representation or experience of Japanese people, for example. Like, you can go down the list of all these things, and there's so much to unpack on the personal level. What I do think this movie did so well, and the reason it was so meaningful to me and so powerful, is it puts into context that these things are not as black and white decisions as they seem on the surface. And once you open the door, you now have to hold them all. You have to hold all of these things in context. And there are no right decisions. And man, what a beautiful, deeply challenging way to think about what the human experience is now. And all of these things that we care about and think about in ambition and obsession and science and discovery. And by the way, a huge part of all of the early stuff in quantum physics was probably about creation and understanding the world. Like, man, I'm not being...
Do you remember... I just want to plug something real quick. Do you remember... I showed you a video a while back. Bill Wirtz, I think, is the name of the creator of it. It's like this YouTuber, musician, who also has like viral TikTok sounds. It's really weird, like the crossover things. Anyway, he has this video called The History of the Entire World. I think that's the name of it.
The History of the Entire World, I guess.
Yes.
That's the one. Yeah, I've seen that.
And it's like, it starts off and then it just starts accelerating. And like, it starts off with like the Big Bang and it just like it accelerates and the world just keeps going. And like the music's swelling and everything's crazy. And then we blew up a bomb. And it's just like this like moment that's supposed to sit with you. And it's like the history of the world, like the climax of the history of the world is this moment that we're talking about, that this movie's about. And like everything else is kind of the aftermath of that moment. It's like, are we in the third act of humanity because of that like climax of the bomb?
I think it's important to recognize. I mean, they talked about it in the movie. Like, did you make a bomb that's powerful enough to end all war? Like, we do live in post-World War II. We live in one of the most peaceful times comparatively in human history. Like
This is an interesting counterpoint.
yeah, violence was like escalating for all of human history, and then in the 20th century, it reached a pinnacle of escalation in World War One
Right.
and then World War Two.
Right.
And since then, worldwide violence, like global violence, is
which
a lot lower.
was sort of what they claimed was the point.
Yeah.
It's if somebody makes this bomb, we can't fight anymore.
Right.
And it's all well and good unless
You know what it's kind of like? It's kind of like when you're in an argument. The three of us have been best friends since college. All of us, I'm sure, if we got into like a really crazy argument and we were like, fuck it, friendship's over. I'm sure
I wanna
all of us,
destroy you.
all of us have something we could say to each other. You
That
each
would
have
end
something
it.
you could say to me. I have something to say that would
would end it.
end our friendship forever. We all have a nuclear
well, it
bomb.
would end the argument and end the friendship.
Correct.
But it would
Correct.
stop the argument.
Correct.
The argument is the metaphor for war here, but
Yeah.
it changes everything. Nothing will ever be the same again.
Yeah.
Yeah. You have friends where in an argument there are certain weapons you could pull out at any moment to end it, but
You
the
don't.
collateral
Yeah.
impact would be too much.
Right.
That's kind of what nuclear bombs have done on a much larger scale.
Yeah, and well, it's interesting to think about too in the context of like the to extend the metaphor. The metaphor with the bomb would be that somebody would have pulled it out eventually.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too.
Yeah.
And that's why it's what makes Oppenheimer such an interesting character. Was it inevitable?
I think the answer is
by the way,
definitely yes.
in there's no alternative timeline. Could the Nazis have created the bomb? What if the Russians had gotten first to the bomb?
Yeah, a key question of this whole movie, I was thinking about this, especially in like the first act, is like, is Oppenheimer just so abnormally intelligent that he's the only person who could have cracked this code?
No, I think the point.
Humanity was going that way.
I think the point of Oppenheimer was there is a very, very significant chance that if not for Oppenheimer, and
Nazis.
we would not have been the first to create the bomb.
Yeah.
And that creates a different version of the world that I can't say. I am us, so I would say it's better.
Right.
But we don't know. And like, and so I think that's what makes him so significant. And again, just to hit it one more time, this movie is ultimately not about any of the intents or even the actions. It is about having to put yourself into the position of the person who feels the consequences and spends the rest of his life 18 years later, as we see him, even further later, trying to wrestle both externally and then more importantly, internally with the consequences of what this all means. Yeah. And we are still, we are people who were born, 50 years after the bomb went off. And we are still thinking about these consequences.
Yeah. I think that's a good point to like soft end on. So now let's get through some of our other categories quickly, and then we'll get out of here. Raven
Florence Pugh's
Baxter
boobs. That's my answer.
Which is funny because I was about to ask the scene that plays in your head. So there you go. The Raven Baxter award for scene that plays in your head. That's Jake's. Mine. I just honestly, it's the ending. It's just his face and the ending. We just talked about it in that line. I just have been contemplating this for the last 12 hours. That's like all I've thought about, other than sleeping. So, Jackson. What plays in your head?
The bomb going off.
Bomb going off.
That scene was so sick.
Practical. Like it was a real explosion. Shout out to Christopher Nolan for being a filmmaker who has the balls to do that. Like, holy shit.
I don't think they actually set off a nuclear bomb.
They didn't set off a nuclear bomb. No, that's not what I'm saying. But it
That would be a sick practical
an
effect.
explosion. Which to be fair, it did like it was a 99% for me because I was like, the fact that it was the one time where I was like, I'm so glad this is practical, but at the same time, like I'm so aware of the fact that it's practical because I know that's not a nuclear bomb,
Right.
But it was still very impressive.
You just really gave you the feeling
Yeah.
of like destruction.
Speaking of which, next award, Coke Room Award for Best Musical Moment or Song. This one's more a sound, which is the explosion. Yeah. Let Oppenheimer be a reminder to us all
To wear earbuds?
always wear earplugs. If you go to a concert, wear earplugs. I don't care. I'm always the lame guy. I was with my siblings at a concert like last year, and I took out my earplugs, and they're like, "Of course, you're the oldest one. You're just getting old." Ha ha ha. I want to be able to hear when I'm 60, so wear earplugs.
Don't wear earplugs to this movie though, because
wear earplugs.
There are some sound, like I would say the three times it really the editing in this movie is just
Superb.
By the way, editor of Francis Ha
yeah.
and Marriage Story and
Really?
Hereditary. Yeah.
Interesting.
Jennifer Lame, I think her name is.
Interesting. To be clear, my earplugs are high fidelity earplugs. They're like $30 on Amazon. They're totally, don't buy like $4 earplugs. You won't hear anything. Buy hi-fi earplugs. You can still hear the same quality of everything, just
I would agree
lower.
for concerts. I don't think you need it for anyway. The three sound moments are one, 3 or 4 different groups of people experiencing the like sound wave from the bomb.
Yeah.
Early in the film, the like crackling of as they're sort of putting you inside Oppenheimer's mind as he's imagining nuclear reactions, and then
those are so
later
cool.
in the movie when the sounds of the feet, like basically they're creating his anxiety. Those three are truly, I think, like the emotional bedrock of feeling and empathy and putting yourself into his seat.
I will say, I think that our theater was especially loud. I don't usually wear earplugs in movies.
I think it was
needed.
I had to be
I think
that
it was
loud.
needed for this.
It was
movie.
so. It
yeah,
was
totally.
That was the most singular part of the film experience.
Yeah.
Was those moments of just like, whoa, like I am in this.
I agree. I heard the same sounds, just not in a way that was physically painful. So
Right. It was painful for me.
there you go.
Yeah.
I did not experience pain. I only experienced emotional and like spiritual pain. Multiverse of Madness recasting. Anyone in this movie who you would put someone else in that spot, or who you would like take their performance in this movie
I think
and
this one's
transpose it
pretty
somewhere
easy.
else? What is it?
Tom Cruise is Oppenheimer.
Okay. I have a real answer.
love it.
Bryan Cranston as Strauss.
Yeah, could have easily worked. This is why I think it was a
I
great
disagree.
performance, but
Because, well, Bryan Cranston is maybe the only other person who, sure, but I think Robert Downey Jr. in this movie, along with it being the whole Barbenheimer thing, is what's going to make this, part of what's going to make this movie so commercially successful, like so accessible to a lot of people. This is such a heavy movie
Yeah,
that
that's true.
It's the kind of movie that we were talking off pod. I was like, holy shit, they made a movie about this. Like, first of all, how did they not before? How are we not thinking about this more as a society, as like a human race?
how is
How did
Oppenheimer
we
not more famous?
Exactly. So the fact that this is the movie that's intended to do that, I think you have to have Iron Man in it. Like for a lot of people, like not us. We were going to go see this movie because of Christopher Nolan, because of Cillian Murphy, because of the subject matter, because of Barbenheimer, for whatever reason. We were going to see this movie no matter what, for sure. But I guarantee you there are people who will see, who at least in the build up to this movie. Oh,
they
Robert
even know
Downey
he's
Jr.'s
in
in
it?
that. Oh,
you know,
Iron
like
Man's
in
in
the
it.
ads. I don't know if
he
people
is.
know he's
Yes,
in
he
it.
is.
Really?
Yes, he is.
know he's in
And I think he's an entry point for enough people for it to matter.
And then my other one, if he was like 20 years younger or 10 years younger, I do think the only other person that could have played Oppenheimer as well is Daniel Day-Lewis.
Oh, sure.
I had to bring up Daniel
Of course you
Day-Lewis.
did. You're just always going to say this for every.
But in this one in particular, I really think he would have done just as good of a
I
job
can
as Cillian Murphy.
see that for sure.
Killian.
Killian gave a.
I think it was a
DDL type
once.
performance.
It was a once in a generation performance. Daniel Lewis doesn't have blue eyes. It wouldn't have worked.
I also love that Cillian Murphy is like Christopher Nolan's guy. He's been in so many Nolan films, and the fact that this is
His first lead.
his first lead,
and he's
such
so
an achievement.
different from anything he's
Yeah.
ever done.
He was Scarecrow.
I'll admit it.
Like,
I was kind of
holy
like
shit.
Cillian Murphy's good, but like he's kind of weird. Like I don't know. He always plays these weird guys. He's in like Inception is the like. Oh my gosh, I would put this as a top 5 acting performance I've ever seen.
Wow.
Wow, I love that.
I'll
All
put
right.
it up there too. It was pretty good.
I don't think I would change any of the castings. The one and only casting I might change, I'm sorry, Jake, was Florence Pugh.
Margot Robbie is Florence Pugh. Why?
Sure, why
She's
not?
the hottest blonde in America.
The world.
Oh, is that?
That was what the
That
script
would have made I Am Become Death, Destroyer of Worlds justified in that moment.
Sure.
Just kidding. Florence was great.
Florence was good. I just something about Florence Pugh is not. It's not as high of a hit rate for me.
My mom texted me about this because after I saw Good Person and have seen a few things with, I'm like Florence Pugh up, buying all in stock. And she texted me, she's like, I'm kind of out on Florence Pugh. She kind of like plays the same character every time.
Yes, completely agree. Well, I don't know if she plays the same character every time because this is different from Midsommar. It's very different from Black Widow. Like, I think she plays the same emotion every time.
Yes.
I think her
This Good Person,
Don't Worry, Darling.
Little Women.
Like, yeah, her pouty face is always the same.
She's a really good actor, but that emotion is the same.
That emotion is the same in everything she plays, and it just takes me out. It's like, that's Florence Pugh. That's her pouty face.
I thought Kitty what's her name was great. Yeah.
Emily Blunt. Yeah.
I didn't
Emily
even
Blunt was
feel like her. Yeah.
phenomenal. Really, really good. I'm trying to think of who else could do the
I
Florence
think there are
Pugh
more old guys who
role.
could have played
It was funny.
Robert Downey Jr., but
Bryan Cranston is the first one that comes to mind.
Why not Bryan Cranston as Truman?
That would have worked as well.
And then Gary Oldman somewhere else. I don't know. They had such a wealth of actors that
it didn't really look like Harry Truman. It looked like
Both
him
of them
playing
male actors.
Churchill in
Yeah.
the other one.
Yeah,
His
you're
Churchill
right.
character, I thought the
Yeah,
same
you're
thing.
right. God, this is gonna bug me. I'm trying to think of someone for the Florence Pugh role. I almost want like
Who looks like a communist?
okay, just
Margot Qualley.
you know
Margaret Qualley, I was
Margaret
gonna say.
Qualley is a yes. In a similar vein, I was gonna say Mia Goth just because I fucking love Mia Goth.
Yeah.
I'm buying Margaret Qualley stocks.
I like Margaret Qualley.
Oh yeah,
too. Me
her
too.
stock's already up.
She's
Buying.
like, her face
I
is
think
like
her
one
s-
of the most beautiful faces I've ever seen.
Yeah, I think her stock is gonna go down a little bit because this next movie she's in doesn't look very good.
Where she's playing like
It's just like
I think
the
it looks
road
good.
trip movie that like references.
it's a
Tarantino
Coen
in the
Brothers
trailers.
movie.
Yeah, sure, it's Coen Brothers. I don't know. It'll probably be okay.
It's only
That
one
Matt
Coen
Damon's
brother.
in.
Yeah,
What'd you guys
sure,
think
Matt
about Matt
Damon's
Damon?
Good. He was
good.
solid.
Yeah.
I think he was what you needed from that role.
I agree.
I think you needed like the likable guy.
How about
He's-
Josh Peck as
I mean,
unnamed scientist
He's
number 9?
kind of Matt Damon is. Sorry, we'll get to that. Matt Damon is kind of like the avatar for America. In
Yeah,
certain ways,
that's true.
You know,
Could have been Tom
He is an
Cruise,
avatar
but-
for at least the American military. You know,
Right.
And so he's an important role, and I think you need Matt Damon, who's just like beloved American actor.
What about
under
Bryan
the age
Cranston
of
as Heisenberg?
50, right? What'd you say? Bryan Cranston is
Cranston.
Heisenberg. Wait, no, that was another Leo moment when they said Heisenberg.
That's what Jake said.
Yeah.
Okay, Josh Peck is unnamed scientist number 9, who has somehow has more voice lines than the woman.
Correct. What's the sequel about?
Benny Safdie kind of like pulled it off. Like he was a bigger role than I expected.
Yeah, he was great.
What's the sequel about?
The creation of the H-bomb.
Oh,
I
was
think
that guy
AI.
from? Hold on, was the guy from?
AI.
Real quick, was the guy from that or what's the Disney show? Even Stevens? Is that right?
LaBeouf, who are you talking
Yeah.
Shia?
No.
in it?
There was a guy who was like a younger Disney Channel guy who was randomly one of the scientists. Even Stevens is the name of the show, correct?
The Shia show? Yeah.
Okay.
I don't
Was
know.
it Beans?
Beans?
Was Beans
No, it
one
wasn't
of the
Beans. It wasn't
scientists?
Beans.
Imagine.
I'm gonna find it. There are so many
Beans as
scientists.
Oppenheimer.
This movie has so many people in it.
It has so many people.
Jason Clarke, Kenneth Branagh,
Rami Malek.
Rami
I was
Malek
really
randomly?
glad. I was really glad when he had like that big moment where he speaks, because if his entire role in the movie was 2 parts where he doesn't speak and he's just kind of like this like weird guy, it was gonna be like too much for me. I could not have handled that. I'm glad he spoke.
Did you find it, Jackson?
I'm looking.
Just good audio content.
I'm sorry.
Well, I guess it would be nice if I could touch your body. I know not everybody has got a body like you. But I gotta think twice before I give my heart away. And I know all the games you play because I play them too. Oh, but I
Casey
need
Affleck was
some
in it?
time
Yeah.
off from that emotion. Time to throw my heart back on the floor.
I can't
but
find it.
I reconsider.
I mean, Gary Oldman's like the 25th person listed.
When it takes for something, but I
don't know
wait for
all the
something more.
words.
But I gotta have faith.
Maybe I was wrong.
I gotta have faith. Cause I got to have faith, the faith, the faith. I got to have faith.
What is this from?
George Michael.
Oh,
It's a song called Faith.
I can't find it.
Okay, that's fine. We're done. That's good. Barbenheimer, we did it, boys. We did Barbenheimer.
How would you rate Barbenheimer as a movie?
Ooh,
On
like
a scale of 1 to
altogether?
5? Altogether, Barbenheimer.
My
on a scale of-
Here's- yesterday.
Here's where I'm gonna land, and I'll end with this. As individual films, Barbie and Oppenheimer are both 4.5 stars. Barbenheimer 5 stars. Amen.
I'm glad we have Barbenheimer
Me too.
as film people.
Good for cinema.
Are we ever going to release a podcast?
So this will be the next one we release, and then we're off to the races.
Sweet.
I'm gonna release this one by the end of this week. I promise.
Amen.
Have you
And
ever
then we're off to the
been
races.
with a woman and just whispered I am become death, destroyer of worlds.
I can't wait to try it.